My uncle, flushed with alcohol, echoed words that cut deeper than any knife. His sentiments found harmony in the nods and murmurs of agreement from the other men gathered around, emboldened by the chorus of support. My husband unleashed a torrent of criticism, each word hitting its mark with precision. His satisfaction gleamed in his eyes as he reveled in the validation of his peers. I forced a calm facade, swallowing my humiliation and rage with each breath. Then, just as tension reached its peak, my mother-in-law rose from her seat, her gaze a force to be reckoned with. "Is that truly all you have to offer?" Her words pierced the heavy air, silencing the room in an instant. "My name is Emma, and I'm a 40-year-old woman working in a medical office. I met Tom, my husband, a man 4 years my senior, through our shared love of tennis. We've been married for 13 years. Though we both longed for children, fate had other plans, leaving a bittersweet ache between us. My in-laws, who live separately, keep a vigilant eye on us, especially my mother-in-law. Our bond is strong. We often enjoy lunches out and shopping trips together. Losing my mother at a young age made my mother-in-law's presence all the more significant. She embraced me with a mother's love, cherishing me as if I were her own flesh and blood. While our marriage initially thrived, over time, my husband's demeanor shifted. After about a decade, he became increasingly domineering. His once gentle kindness toward me evaporated. Moreover, his workload burgeoned, leading to frequent overtime and business trips. 3 years ago, he was reassigned to a different department, exacerbating our disconnect. He now spends half the week away from home. Upon his sporadic returns, his demands are curt and dismissive. "Dinner," he barks, or "Is the bath ready yet?" treating me as if I were merely a servant. Fed up, I once dared to voice my grievances. "You're not a child anymore. You should at least handle your own clothes," I protested. His response was chilling. "What nonsense is this? Your role is to obey me as your husband. Don't complain, you're my wife." For what felt like an eternity, my husband's accusatory finger jabbed the air, his voice rising in a crescendo of abuse. This ritual of verbal assault would replay whenever his mood soared, a relentless cycle I couldn't escape. His incessant nagging and troublesome behavior left me no choice but to acquiesce. Sitting at the dinner table one evening, I faced yet another onslaught of criticism. "More vegetables again. Am I supposed to eat like a rabbit now? Get some meat on the table. You know your cholesterol's high." Reluctantly, I resolved to reduce the meat intake. But before I could speak, he rose abruptly, flinging the meal I had prepared onto the floor. "No one knows my body better than me. I'll eat out," I declared, but my words fell on deaf ears as he stormed out, wallet and phone in hand, slamming the door behind him. Every day, I scored the internet for low-salt, low-meat recipes, desperate to accommodate his high cholesterol flagged in his company's medical checkup. Yet despite my efforts, it all seemed in vain. As I stooped to clean up the mess on the floor, a wave of desolation washed over me. 3 hours later, my husband returned, his tune merry, his senses dulled by alcohol. In resignation, I retrieved his coat from where he carelessly flung it, only to catch a whiff of grilled meat mingled with a perfume unfamiliar to me. Doubts that had lingered in the shadows of my mind surfaced with renewed intensity. I had suspected infidelity in the past, but lacking concrete evidence, I chose to suppress my concerns. Yet the distinct scent of that perfume fueled my suspicions like never before. From then on, whenever my husband's temper flared, he would vanish without explanation, returning home only to rush into the shower. Each time, the telltale fragrance lingered in the air, a haunting reminder that something was amiss. Soon, his careless whistling in the shower would be silenced unless I confronted the truth lurking within his coat. Bolstered by my growing conviction of his infidelity, I resolved to gather evidence to confront him. 3 weeks later, on New Year's Day, we made our customary visit to my in-laws' home, where relatives congregated for the annual celebration. The table was adorned with a feast prepared lovingly by my mother-in-law, a colorful array tempting the senses. Amid greetings exchanged and well wishes shared, my husband's discontent simmered just beneath the surface. "Don't hold back, Emma. Dig in," my mother-in-law encouraged, to which I gratefully replied. Yet my husband's gaze bored into me with disapproval as I savored the meal, appreciating the effort put forth by his mother. "Where are the chopsticks?" His voice pierced the air, breaking the harmony of the gathering. Hastily, I fetched them from the kitchen, presented them to him, only to be met with another demand. "And the cups?" he queried, his irritation palpable. Shouldn't she anticipate these things without being asked? You need to be more attentive to your surroundings, he chided, his words like barbs aimed at my every move. Despite the presence of our extended family, my husband's verbal assaults persisted. I'm not a mind reader. You have to communicate with me, he insisted, his tone cutting through the festive atmosphere. Suppressing my frustration, I handed him a glass, which he accepted with a charming smile as he sipped the sake poured by our relatives. Would you care for a drink, Emma? My uncle kindly offered, but my husband interjected, she's on chauffeur duty today, dismissing the gesture. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and the other women toiled away in the kitchen, preparing lunch and attending to the needs of the men. Donning an apron I brought from home, I joined the flurry of activity, working tirelessly alongside them, while my father-in-law and the other men reveled in their merriment, consuming one bottle of sake after another. The sounds of their boisterous laughter filled the air. Expressing her sympathy for our busyness, my mother-in-law interrupted our tasks to offer us a respite, serving steaming cups of tea. As we sat together, engaging in light conversation, my husband's voice echoed from the living room, a reminder of the tension simmering just beyond our temporary sanctuary. Let's spice things up with some honesty, shall we? A little stress relief for the new year, my husband proposed to the delight of the gathered guests. The loser of a round of rock, paper, scissors gets to spill the beans, he declared, his words slurred from alcohol. That sounds like a riot, my mother-in-law chimed in, her interest piqued. Little did she know, I had my own agenda for this New Year's Eve gathering. As the game commenced with enthusiastic shouts, I seized the opportunity presented by my husband's unexpected suggestion. Retrieving something from my bag, I discreetly tucked it into my apron pocket. Amidst the raucous game, the losers vented their frustrations about work and bosses, met with sympathetic nods and murmurs of agreement. It's all too true, the chorus of listeners echoed. Finally, it was my husband's turn to air his grievances, having lost the game of rock, paper, scissors. Anticipation and anxiety knotted in my stomach as I awaited his revelations. My complaint is that my wife lacks attractiveness, and her cooking leaves much to be desired. My husband's words struck me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me reeling in shock. My father-in-law, clearly uncomfortable, hastily cleared his throat. But when you two tied the knot, you couldn't stop praising her beauty and culinary skills, he interjected, attempting to diffuse the tension. That was ages ago, Dad. Nowadays, she serves up bland dishes filled with nothing but leaves like rabbit food. My uncle's demeanor darkened at the revelation. It's unacceptable. As his wife, she should step up her game. His sentiments found resonance among the men present. Unbeknownst to them, I had dedicated countless hours pondering my husband's health and meticulously planning our meals. Yet their words flowed freely, oblivious to my efforts. Overwhelmed by a cocktail of embarrassment and fury, I longed to escape. As the conversation shifted to complaints about wives, my husband led the charge. I toil away every day, yet my allowance remains unchanged. Stop your griping and obey me, my father-in-law chuckled in agreement, while the wives, downtrodden, remained silent. Then it was my husband's turn once more. Everyone else is blessed with children, he declared, but my wife is defective, incapable of bearing offspring. His callous words pierced me to the core, shattering the illusion of our marriage. The ache of unfulfilled dreams and the sting of betrayal weighed heavy on my heart, drowning me in a sea of sorrow and frustration. I inhaled deeply, willing the tears threatening to spill over to retreat. It'll all work out, Emma. My mother-in-law's gentle grip on my hand offered a modicum of comfort. With a heavy sigh, she rose from her seat, her countenance dark with a resolve I hadn't witnessed before. Is that all you've got to say? Her unexpected outburst jolted the men, accustomed to her usual gentle demeanor. The once vibrant atmosphere fell into an uneasy silence. Come on now, let's not ruin the fun, my father-in-law attempted to diffuse the tension, addressing my mother-in-law. Fun? Are you the only ones enjoying yourselves here? You should have put a stop to this. My mother-in-law's voice trembled with righteous indignation. Shame on you, speaking to her like that, labeling her defective. How dare you? She continued, her gaze piercing. Yes, she's right. My father-in-law's troubled expression betrayed his discomfort as he averted his eyes. We all have grievances to air, he conceded. Exactly. The women, previously silent, erupted in support, their applause ringing through the room. Let's not hold back. Speak your mind, and we'll all feel better. The words of my mother-in-law ignited a cascade of truth from the women, each expressing their grievances with newfound courage. If you want more allowance, then earn more. Why not take initiative instead of expecting us to cater to your every need? They demanded, their voices ringing with determination. As the wives confronted their husbands with precise criticisms, the men faltered, offering apologies in succession. Only my husband remained unmoved, his indifference palpable. "Why should I apologize for speaking the truth?" he retorted, locking eyes with Noah in a tense exchange. "I refuse to apologize, and I'll say it again. She's unattractive, a terrible cook, and incapable of bearing children." My husband's accusatory finger pointed squarely at me, each word a dagger to my heart. The dam of sorrow and frustration I had meticulously held in check finally burst, giving way to a tidal wave of rage. "You have no right to speak to me like that," I confronted my husband with a measured tone, my hand discreetly gripping the cell phone hidden in my apron pocket. "It's unfair that you're the only one allowed to vent. I have grievances too, you know, and you wouldn't object, would you? You've aired your complaints about me plenty of times. I'd welcome appreciation, but not baseless accusations." With a deliberate motion, I withdrew an envelope from my pocket, scattering its contents across the table where our relatives sat. The photographs revealed damning evidence: my husband entering a hotel room with another woman, then exiting her apartment, hand in hand. Bolstered by my suspicions, I had discreetly installed a GPS tracker in his car, providing irrefutable proof of his infidelity. Originally intended for a private discussion with my mother-in-law, the situation demanded immediate action. Guests filled the room as the truth unfolded, disrupting the once jovial atmosphere. Frantically, my husband attempted to gather the incriminating photos. "Isn't it normal for husbands to stray?" He appealed to the men for validation, but his plea fell on deaf ears. No one in the room offered agreement, leaving him isolated in his deceit. As my uncle, once a supporter of my husband, denounced infidelity with a resounding "No, that's unforgivable," the other men nodded in solemn agreement. Yet my husband remained defiant. "You lot couldn't even dare to stray from your wives," he taunted, his laughter hollow and bitter. My uncle, spurred into action by my husband's audacity, rose from his seat. "Who truly bears the shame here?" he challenged, echoed by murmurs of concurrence from the men, their gazes piercing through my husband's facade. Despite his attempts to maintain a facade of strength and righteousness, my husband's demeanor reeked of desperation, leaving me repulsed by his arrogance. With resolve, I confronted him once more, armed with further evidence. "A week ago, I received a call from Maruka-san, your newfound love," I revealed, each word laden with the weight of betrayal. "She claimed you've been seeing each other for 3 years now." My husband's feeble attempts at denial only served to betray his guilt. "She even mentioned your subordinate, and the fact that she's 7 months pregnant," I continued, unmasking the deceit woven into his web of lies. "She pleaded for a divorce, stating that you refused to acknowledge the child." Fearing my reaction, his protests dissolved into stammered excuses as I extracted my phone from my apron pocket, placing it on speaker for all to hear. "Maruka-san, did you hear what I just said?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Through stifled sobs, her response came quietly but unmistakably. "Yes," she confirmed, her words carrying the weight of truth, shattering the illusion my husband had meticulously constructed. In fact, the day before New Year's, I had reached out to the girl, informing her of my intentions to call her the next day. Seeking insight into my husband's true intentions, she had agreed, and thus, I made the call just before confronting him. Overhearing the conversation, she was overcome with tears and fury. "He told me to wait until our divorce is finalized," she lamented, her voice trembling with betrayal. "I never uttered such words. Surely, as my wife, you understand, don't you? Why would I say such a thing?" "You're the one who betrayed me," my husband countered, his gaze falling to the ground in shame. "I'll never forgive you," she declared before abruptly ending the call, her trust in my husband shattered. Presenting the divorce papers I had prepared, I demanded his signature, only to be met with a storm of fury. "Absolutely not. I can't simply sign this on a whim. How dare you, sis? Besides, after all this, you'll owe me 2 million yen in alimony." "No, I refuse to divorce you. I simply don't have that kind of money," he protested, his demeanor devolving into childish petulance as he stamped his feet in protest. Witnessing my husband's unprecedented display of immaturity, I nearly chuckled, but remained resolute in my demand for divorce and alimony. Tom, you're not a child. It's shameful. My mother-in-law's frustration with his pitiful behavior was evident as she scolded him with an exasperated expression. You can't just refuse divorce and alimony. Face reality with dignity, I pressed on, my tone unwavering. It's not that simple, Mom. Dad, you understand how I feel, right? My husband appealed, seeking validation. Absolutely not. I can't condone your actions. My father-in-law's response was firm, leaving my husband with little recourse. Reluctantly, he signed the divorce papers and agreed to the alimony, his tears held back only by sheer willpower. Believing this gathering to be the opportune moment to expose my husband's infidelity, I pushed him further. Oh, by the way, I've terminated our lease at the end of the month. One home should suffice for you, shouldn't it? My words were met with applause from the women and deep sighs from the men, and my husband left my in-laws' house, seemingly fleeing from the attention of everyone present. The next day, they filed for divorce at the city office and relocated to a rental apartment I had already arranged. Additionally, I sought 1.5 million yen in alimony from my ex-husband's unfaithful partner. It would have been a harsh blow for the girl, having quit her job upon learning of her pregnancy. But forgiveness was out of the question. After losing his apartment, my ex-husband sought refuge with the girl. Promptly, he acknowledged paternity upon divorce. However, she eventually severed ties, demanding 1.5 million yen per month in child support. Moreover, my ex-husband resigned from his job following the scandal's exposure, making it untenable for him to continue with the company. Left abandoned by his parents and unable to secure a new job, my ex-husband resorted to sleeping in internet cafes and juggling part-time gigs to meet his alimony obligations. Susan, my former mother-in-law, confided in me about his deteriorating health, citing elevated cholesterol levels and the toll his self-indulgent lifestyle had taken since our divorce. Interestingly, Susan and I forged an unexpected friendship post-divorce, growing closer than ever before. Now I find solace in the tranquility of my life, relishing the peace that comes with solitude. Growing up, my twin sister Anna and I were very different. She was like the perfect daughter while I wasn't. Our dad was a serious professor, always focused on his work, and our mom was all about being a traditional housewife. They wanted us to be just like them, but I was more into band t-shirts and keeping to myself. Mom always compared me to Anna, who seemed to do everything right. She'd ask why I couldn't be more like her, especially when I showed up at breakfast with my headphones on. Anna, on the other hand, basked in Mom's praise. She'd wonder why it was so hard for me to dress nicely and smile. It felt like we were from different worlds. One Saturday, we had to attend one of Dad's boring faculty parties, which we couldn't skip. I decided to rebel in my own little way. I put on some heavy eyeliner and wore boots that definitely didn't fit the usual standards. "You're not going out like that, are you?" Mom caught me on the stairs, eyeing my boots like they were covered in mud. I shrugged, my usual defense. "Don't see why not," she sighed, that long sigh that meant I was the biggest disappointment in her perfectly ordered world. "Please, Eliza, just this once, can't you try to fit in? For once, pretend we're the perfect family." I shot back, tired of the same old argument. "It's not about pretending, it's about showing respect for your father," she argued, her voice getting sharper. Anna overheard and chimed in, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Mom's right, Liz, it's not that hard to look decent. Why do you always have to make things difficult? Maybe it'll want to be a clone of you, Anna," I snapped, feeling my face heat up. I hated these arguments, hated being compared, but more than anything, I hated feeling like the odd one out in my own home. Dad appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking serious. "Eliza, go change now. We're leaving in 10 minutes, he said firmly. His tone didn't allow for any argument. He didn't need to raise his voice. The disappointment in his eyes was enough to make me obey. I marched back to my room to swap my boots for boring flats and wipe away half my eyeliner. As we drove to the party, the car was silent except for the classical music Dad insisted on playing because it was calming. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. In that moment, I promised myself someday I'd live a life where no one could tell me what to wear, how to act, or who to be. Someday, I'd be free from the echo of these expectations. My room was the only place where I could pretend I was somewhere else, anywhere else. Unlike the rest of the house, filled with my parents' choices, my room was mine. It wasn't much, just 4 walls covered in sketches and music posters, but it was my escape from the reality of my family's expectations. One evening, as I was trying to lose myself in a playlist of my favorite bands, Dad knocked and marched into my room. His face was set in a familiar frown. "Eliza, turn that noise down, and why haven't you studied with Anna today? You know you both have exams coming up," he said, his voice stern. I pulled out one earbud and looked up at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been studying, just not with Anna. I learn better on my own," I explained. Dad shook his head, clearly not convinced. "You know the rules. Your sister gets good grades, and you should be doing the same." "It's not about making things difficult," I said, feeling frustrated. "I just don't see why I have to follow Anna's way of doing everything. Can't I have my own way of studying?" He didn't respond to that, just shifted his complaint. "And those friends of yours? I saw you with them at the cafe yesterday. I don't think they're a good influence. You should be spending time with the daughters of my colleagues. They're more suitable." My temper rose. "Suitable for what? For you?" "Because they talk about economics and pretend to enjoy those boring university gatherings." Before he could answer, Mom appeared at the doorway, her voice sharp as she joined in. "Eliza, your father is right. Those girls are from good families. They know how to behave. They're the kind of friends you should want." I stood up, facing both of them. "What if I don't want friends who are picked for me? What if I want to choose my own friends, choose what I study, or even what I want to be?" I exclaimed. Mom's response was final. "That's enough, Eliza. You know your future is with the university. Your father has made sure of that. And after you graduate, you'll need to start thinking about settling down." The words "settling down" hung in the air like a life sentence. "You mean start thinking about being someone's wife like Anna is? Is that all you think I'm meant for?" Mom's face softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "We want what's best for you. Following the path we've set out will give you a good life." "A good life," I repeated, the bitterness evident in my tone. "Is it a good life if it's someone else's idea of good?" No one answered. They didn't need to. We all knew there was no point in arguing. They had their plans, and they expected me to fall in line, just like Anna. Anna and I were like 2 sides of the same coin, always together but never on the same page. At university, where Dad taught, the differences between us grew even more obvious. She was into business management, the golden child, always nodding along in lectures, asking smart questions that made professors appreciate her. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the same program, but it felt like wearing a shoe on the wrong foot. Awkward, uncomfortable, and just plain wrong. One afternoon, as I trudged through a mountain of textbooks in the library, Anna breezed in, her notes organized, her smile ready. "Hey Liz, are you coming to the study group tonight? Professor Hall mentioned he's dropping by. Could be good for us to show face," she said, her tone light but insistent. I glanced up, feeling the weight of her expectations. "No, I don't think so. Those things aren't really my scene, you know," I replied. She frowned, placing her books down with a thud that matched her disapproval. "It's not about it being your scene, Liz. It's about making the right impressions. You need to start taking this seriously. We're graduating soon." I shrugged, turning back to my notes. "I am taking it seriously, just not in a way that makes me miserable. Why bother pretending? Because, Liz, sometimes you have to play the game to get ahead. You think I like all of this?" She gestured around at her perfectly tabbed textbooks and color-coded notes. "It's not about liking it, it's about doing what's necessary." I shook my head, pushing back my chair with a scrape. "Well, maybe I'm tired of doing what's necessary according to everyone else. Did you ever think of that?" Her voice softened, but her eyes were steel. "Liz, I'm just trying to look out for you. It's not going to be around to sort things out forever. What are you going to do if you keep alienating everyone? Maybe I'll figure it out on my own. Maybe I don't need to follow Dad's roadmap or yours." I shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. Anna sighed, her frustration clear. "You're so stubborn. Just try it, okay? For me, if not for yourself. Show up tonight. Talk to Professor Hall. It won't kill you," Anna urged. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my annoyingly perfect sister, but someone who actually cared in her own way. "Fine, I'll think about it," I conceded, not ready to promise more. "Thank you," she said, her smile returning. "It's not that bad, you know. You might even like it if you gave it a chance." "Doped it," I muttered, but I knew I'd lost this round. For Anna, I'd show up, sit through another boring discussion, and nod at the right times. It was just a few hours, I told myself. How bad could it be? As it turned out, not as bad as I thought. Professor Hall was surprisingly interesting when he wasn't lecturing from a podium. I even asked a question which earned a shocked but pleased look from Anna. Later, as we walked back to our dorm, Anna nudged me. See? Not so terrible, right? That fragile piece didn't last long, however. In our last year, Anna introduced us to her fiancé, a lawyer 10 years her senior, already well established and exactly what our parents dreamed of. Mom and Dad were over the moon, praising Anna for making such a smart match, and immediately turned their expectant eyes on me. Now, Eliza, it's your turn to find someone suitable, Dad said one evening over dinner, his tone implying that my time was running out. Mom nodded enthusiastically, already planning out my life as if it were another one of her well-organized home projects. Think about your future, dear. Someone who can provide for you, who has a good standing. I remember staring at my plate, feeling the walls close in. Anna's wedding was meticulously planned down to the last detail by Mom, from the bridesmaids' dresses to the floral arrangements, showcasing her perfect vision of family prestige. After the wedding, Mom often visited Anna, doling out advice and ensuring her life played out just as she had orchestrated. Witnessing this, I knew one thing for certain. I didn't want my life tailored by someone else's hands. One day, I was walking down the street, lost in thoughts of how to escape the life my parents envisioned for me when I heard the deep rumble of a motorcycle approaching. Curiosity pulled me toward the sound. That's when I saw him, Jake, with his leather jacket and carefree smile, pulling up beside me. You look like you need a ride, he called over the roar of the engine, a playful twinkle in his eyes. I hesitated, glancing back towards the path home and at his outstretched hand. What did I have to lose? Sure, why not? I replied, my voice a mix of nerves and excitement. Climbing onto the back of his bike, I felt a rush of adrenaline as we sped away. The wind whipped through my hair, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed genuinely. Jake shouted something about showing me his world, and I held on tighter, not wanting this moment to end. We stopped at a diner frequented by bikers over burgers, workers, and fries. Jake told me about his life as a welder, his passion for bikes, and his love for the open road. It was so different from anything I was used to, raw and real, I remarked, my voice barely above the clatter of plates and chatter around us. Don't you get scared living like this? Scared? No, it's thrilling. You never know what's around the corner. Isn't that better than having everything planned out for you? Jake replied, his eyes lighting up with each word. Over the next few weeks, we met secretly. Each ride on Jake's motorcycle pulled me further from the life I was supposed to live and closer to the life I wanted. The speed, the adventure, it wasn't just about the thrill. It was about feeling alive, feeling free. One evening, as we watched the sunset from a secluded overlook, Jake turned to me. Eliza, I don't just ride to escape. I ride to feel alive, to make every moment count. With you, every moment feels like it's worth something. I leaned into him, my heart beating fast. I've never felt like this before. You make me feel free, Jake, I confessed. He smiled, pulling me closer. Then let's not go back to just existing. Let's live. 6 months with Jake felt like a lifetime of moments I'd always dreamed of. The day he proposed under the stars with a gentle rumble of his bike in the background, my heart screamed a yes before my mouth could form the word. It was perfect, except for one looming hurdle. My parents. I wrestled with the fear of introducing Jake to them. He was everything they disapproved of, his rough edges, his wild spirit, his simple yet content life as a welder. But love bolstered my courage, and I decided it was time they knew. The day I brought Jake home, he was clad in his usual attire, a leather vest, black t-shirt, ripped jeans, and a bandana. I loved it about him. He was unapologetically himself. As we stepped inside, I could already feel the weight of my parents' judgment. Mom's face went pale at the sight of Jake, her eyes widening in shock. What in the world, Eliza? She gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Dad's reaction was harsher, his words sharp as knives. Who is this, and why is he dressed like a thug in our house? I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Mom, Dad, this is Jake. He's the man I love. We're getting married. Their silence was deafening. Then Dad turned to Jake, his tone laced with disdain. Married? What do you do for a living, young man? What are your qualifications? Jake, bless him, didn't waver. I'm a welder. I took some specialized courses after high school. I work hard and I make an honest living. The look on my parents' faces was a mix of horror and disbelief. Mom looked like she might faint. A welder, Eliza. You can't be serious, as voice rose, anger flaring. You expect us to give our blessing to this? To throw away your future for a welder? I felt my resolve harden. Yes, because he makes me happy. Isn't that what should matter? But the life you'll lead, Mom started, her voice tremulous. Will be the life I choose. I shot back, my own voice gaining strength. Dad shook his head, his decision clear. We cannot and will not support this. If you choose him, don't expect to be a part of this family. The finality in his tone broke my heart, but not my decision. Jake squeezed my hand, giving me the strength to face them. Then I choose Jake. I choose us. I choose my happiness. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad's jaw clenched tight. If you walk out with him, don't bother coming back, Dad said, his voice cold. Walking away from my parents' house with Jake, my heart was a mess of emotions, pain, relief, excitement, and fear all mixed into one. The night air felt different, like each breath I took was a step further into a new life. We rode in silence for a while, the only sound the steady roar of the motorcycle beneath us. When we finally stopped at a small diner on the outskirts of town, Jake turned to me, his face serious. You sure about this, Eliza? I mean, really sure? There's no going back after tonight, he said, his eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt. I nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. I've never been more sure of anything. Being with you, this feels right. It feels like what I'm supposed to do. He smiled, that reckless, charming smile that had won me over the first day we met. All right then, let's do it. Let's start our life together. Inside the diner, we found a quiet booth in the corner. The waitress brought over 2 coffees without asking, and we sat there, planning our next steps. So what's first? I asked, stirring cream into my coffee, watching it swirl and blend. We'll need to find a place to stay, at least for a while. Then maybe look for jobs. I have some buddies who can help us get started, Jake replied, his tone practical but optimistic. It's going to be tough, isn't it? I said, more a statement than a question. The reality of what we were doing was beginning to sink in. Jake reached across the table, his hand covering mine. It might be, but we'll handle it together. Tough is nothing new for either of us, right? I couldn't help but laugh. A short, sharp burst of genuine amusement. Right, together. We spent hours in that diner, talking and planning. Every so often, Jake would throw out an idea that sounded so wild, so free, that it made my heart jump. And maybe one day we'll save enough to take that road trip across the country. Just you, me, and the open road. I like that, I said, allowing myself to dream bigger than I had ever dared. Riding back into the city, we began our search. The next weeks were a blur of activity. We found a small apartment on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Jake found work at a local garage, and I picked up shifts at a nearby diner. Life was hard, but it was ours. We made do with what we had, and every night when we came home to each other, it felt like we had everything. Months later, we decided it was time to make it official and got married in a small, intimate ceremony. I held on to a sliver of hope that my family would show up, that they would see how happy I was and let go of their prejudices. But the chairs reserved for them remained empty and no congratulatory messages came. Despite the sting of their absence, the day was perfect because it was ours. Over time, I grew incredibly close to Jake's mom. She welcomed me with open arms, calling me her daughter, filling in the gaps left by my own family. Her warmth and acceptance healed some of the wounds left by my parents' rejection. Things were finally looking up for Jake and me. After he completed additional diving training and became a certified underwater welder, his income shot up to $150,000 a year. That change made a world of difference. We managed to buy a townhouse in a nice area, the kind of place I'd always dreamed about but never thought I'd actually live in. I started working as a dispatcher in Jake's company. It wasn't just a job. It felt like I was part of something important, supporting the man I loved and building our future together. On weekends, we escaped the city on his bike, roaring through winding roads and taking in breathtaking views of nature. Those moments with the wind in my hair and his warmth against my back were pure bliss. Living nearby, my mother-in-law became a frequent visitor. One such afternoon, while Jake was tinkering in the garage and I was fixing us some coffee, she arrived looking a bit troubled. "There's been some ugly news," she said as she settled down at the kitchen table. Something about a professor at the university involved in a harassment scandal. My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, did they say who it was?" I tried to keep my voice steady, dreading the answer. She shook her head. No, they didn't mention a name on the radio. But you know how these things go. It's probably all over the TV by now. Nodding, I flicked on the television, tuning into the news. Sure enough, there was a report on the scandal, and as I had feared, my father's face appeared on the screen. The anchor detailed accusations against him, and I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. Turning off the TV, I sat down heavily, trying to process the news. Jake came in, wiping his hands on a rag, and saw my face. "What's wrong, babe?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "It's my dad. He's been accused of harassing a student." Jake's expression hardened for a moment before he came over and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Eliza. That's tough news. How do you want to handle this?" I shook my head, not really sure of anything at the moment. "I don't know. I mean, what can I even do? It's not like we're close anymore." He squeezed my hand, understanding. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We don't have to figure it all out right now." I decided to wait and see how things unfolded before making any moves. Whatever decision I made, I knew I'd have Jake by my side, and that was the reassurance I needed to face whatever came next. Life had been peaceful until that unexpected afternoon at work when a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. I hadn't seen my parents in a long while, and the sight of them stirred up a mix of emotions I thought I had put to rest. Both of them looked dramatically changed. The scandal had taken its toll. Mom had lost a lot of weight and looked years older, while Dad appeared broken, a shadow of the stern man he once was. My mother spotted me and rushed over, arms open as if nothing had happened, as if years of distance and disapproval could be bridged in an instant. But I couldn't embrace her, not now. Instead, I stepped back and took Jake's hand, looking for strength in his presence. "Eliza, it was so hard to find you," Mom said, her voice cracking with emotion. Dad, ever the gruff one, cut to the chase, his voice harsh and bitter. "I was accused unfairly, you know. I went to your sister's husband for help, but that bloodsucker wanted a fortune. Your sister sided with him, and now they've kicked us out. We need your help." I stared at them, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. "Help? After all these years, you show up and demand help. We have nowhere else to go." Mom's voice was desperate. "They've disowned us too. We thought maybe we could stay with you." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Stay with me? After you disowned me, you made it clear I wasn't your daughter anymore." Dad's face turned red, his old temper flaring up. "You owe us, Eliza, after all we've done for you." "That's where you're wrong," I interrupted, feeling Jake squeeze my hand in support. "I don't owe you anything. You threw me out because I chose my happiness over your demands, and now you want what? To just move in and pretend like we're a family." The situation was spiraling, and I could see people watching, a crowd beginning to form. Mom started to cry, her sobs loud and attracting even more attention. "You're being ungrateful after everything we've done for you," she accused through her tears. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. "No, Mom, I'm not ungrateful. I'm free and happy. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." As we walked away, I heard my dad yelling, but Jake leaned over and quietly told the security team, "Don't let them come here again." The following months flew by, filled with love and peace. We welcomed a son, a new beginning in our growing family. My parents never came back. That day in the parking lot was the last I saw of them. And while part of me grieved for what could have been, I knew I had made the right choice for me and for my family.
Have you ever heard the saying, "Your thoughts shape your words, words turn into actions, actions become habits, habits define your character, and your character shapes your destiny"? Simply put, what you think can decide where you end up in life. It might sound deep, but it's a straightforward concept. Your thoughts influence how you live. By the time you realize this, it could be too late. This is the story I want to share today. I'm Rebecca, 54 years old, working part-time as a homemaker. Married for 30 years, our 2 kids are grown, and my husband and I enjoy our days together as a couple. Retirement is approaching. I mentioned this over dinner to my husband, who's 3 years older than me and will retire in 3 years. He's been a banker for about 35 years since college. In the past, it was common to use the retirement bonus to pay off the mortgage and plan for post-retirement life. Paying off the mortgage at once with a lump sum was the norm. But times have changed. Oh, really? My husband explained that only a handful of companies offer retirement bonuses in the hundreds of thousands, and getting tens of thousands is considered good. Besides, there's the challenge of needing $200,000 for retirement, and more households prefer keeping as much cash as possible. I was quite intrigued by my husband's banker-like perspective. Regarding our house, what if we pay off a chunk to save on interest? We can then manage the remaining loan with our reduced living expenses. Fortunately, I can work as a contract employee even after retiring. It's comforting to have a financially savvy husband. You're reliable. I complimented him while pouring a glass of wine. One day, some unexpected guests arrived at our house. "Hey, Rebecca, it's been a while," greeted my 6-year-old brother and his wife, Annabelle. I must have made a face upon seeing them. They weren't pleasant people, but I kept my thoughts to myself. "Why are you here in the middle of the day on a weekday?" I inquired. Annabelle promptly replied, "Well, we just built a new house, and we thought of getting a congratulatory gift." A congratulatory gift? It felt rather impolite to come seeking gifts, and I'm sure many would agree. However, these individuals considered it normal, posing a problem. Reflecting on it, they've been money-focused since their marriage. Back when they got married, I was still in college, and my brother shamelessly said, "You're over 20 now, so you're an adult. Give us a gift, whether you're earning or not. Going to college as a woman is a waste. Use that tuition money for our gift instead." Even my parents were astonished by my brother's greed. I thought no one could be more greedy than him, but it turned out Annabelle was equally miserly. They talk about money all the time, even during Christmas and New Year's. "Rebecca, how much do you make? What's your husband's bonus? What assets does your family have? How much is your father getting in pension?" Annabelle inquired. There's a recent popular web service that analyzes people's brains just by entering their names, and I can imagine if they used it, the word money would dominate. Dealing with such vulgar and uncivilized people is something I only endure when necessary, and yet here they are, expecting a congratulatory gift for their new house. Wait, a new house? I learned that my brother retired at 60 this year. Annabelle seems to be working part-time, but, well, this might sound odd. But did you secure a proper loan for your new house? When I inquired, my brother responded, "Loan? Not at all. I bought this house with my retirement money and the inheritance from her parents." It turns out my brother used his $80,000 retirement funds, $140,000 in savings, and his sister-in-law's parents' $250,000 inheritance to purchase a house. I've been in a rental for a long time, and I wanted to experience living in a house. A new house is definitely nice. Indeed, it's really nice. Much cleaner than this old house. It's barrier-free, and will be secure in our old age. However, I'm concerned about such a risky move. But you still have 5 years until you start receiving your pension. Don't you think it would be better to have some savings for your old age? When I mentioned that, my sister-in-law shot me a contemptuous look. "You're such a worrywart. We've thought about those things." At that moment, my brother and his wife exchanged a creepy smile as they leaned in close to each other. What are they plotting? I discovered their scheme a month later. "Rebecca, your dad collapsed. I got that call from my mother during my lunch break at work. My father was perfectly fine when I spoke to him a week ago. Why did this happen?" I informed my workplace and immediately rushed to the hospital. Upon arrival, my husband was already there, offering comfort to my haggard and slouched-shoulder mother. "How's Dad doing?" I inquired, prompting my husband to explain that instead of my mother, my father had collapsed in the bathroom and was rushed unconscious to the hospital. He had been diagnosed with a subarachnoid hemorrhage, undergoing immediate surgery and still undergoing treatment. I see. Did you inform my brothers? Yes, I did, but they mentioned discussing the inheritance before visiting his bedside. So, rather than coming to the hospital, they chose to consult with a lawyer at the law firm. How money-focused can those insensitive couples be? My father is still alive, albeit in critical condition, with a chance of the worst outcome, but it seems inhumane to prioritize sorting out finances while he's still fighting. I'm at a loss for words. Even my mother wears a resigned expression towards their behavior. Honestly, I'm appalled. What kind of heartless individuals are they? The surgery on my father was successful. However, his elderly condition remained precarious, and making predictions seemed impossible. While my mother and I took turns visiting, my brother and his wife were nowhere to be found. Then, a week after the surgery, we received a call from the hospital. Your father's condition has suddenly changed. My husband, mother, and I rushed to the hospital, only to find my brother and his wife surprisingly already there. You arrived early. I commented to my brother, who oddly wore a cheerful expression. Well, why would he look so happy when our parent is in critical condition? The reason became apparent quickly. Hey, what about your father's life insurance? Can you ask your mother about it? My sister-in-law whispered audibly in the hushed hospital room. I shot her a glare, but she appeared genuinely puzzled, saying, "What's wrong?" That foolish expression of hers only fueled my anger. Then the doctor entered the room to check on my father. I believe today is the turning point. The doctor informed us with a serious expression, and my husband, mother, and I broke down in tears. Memories of my father flashed through my mind in an instant. My mother was in the same state, holding my father's hand and calling out to him with a tearful voice. Oh, but we finally get it. Yeah, now our retirement is secure. I overheard my brother and his wife conversing as we mourned. They seemed eagerly anticipating my father's passing. I recalled what they had said earlier. Their focus was on their retirement, connecting it to my father's inheritance, the new house they built by depleting their savings, the matters with the law firm, and this callous statement. My mother seemed to grasp their intentions and shot a sudden look at my brother and his wife. They had a hyena-like appearance, fixated on their prey and eagerly awaiting its demise. People often say that when anger peaks, it transforms into an unusual calmness, and that proved true. My mother appeared to share the same sentiments, and after silently observing my brother and his wife, she suggested, "Let's step outside for a moment." We exited the hospital room and settled into a discussion in the hospital's lounge. "You two really have no idea," my mother stated with a mix of disbelief and perhaps pity as she looked at them. "What do you mean?" My sister-in-law noticed the shift in my mother's demeanor, her expression suddenly stiffening. My brother maintained a relaxed look, but I wondered if it was only a matter of time. My mother continued, "There's no inheritance for you two to claim." "What? What do you mean, Mom?" My brother's expression abruptly tensed. "There's nothing to inherit. The house and land we live on are in my name, and your father has no assets." Come to think of it, I've heard this before. My father was the type who didn't hoard money. He had a habit of spending all he had, and my mother handled all the household finances. The only money my father possessed was for his daily cigarette expenses. Aside from a vague understanding of money, he was a good husband and father. So my mother and father managed quite well together. In reality, my father had no significant assets, and if anything, he only had a few dollars for his cigarette expenses in the coin purse he always carried. "But he has life insurance, right?" "Yes, but I am the beneficiary. It's none of your concern," my mother sharply replied. "Your father is still alive, and this couple is only thinking about money, bringing up life insurance." As I was about to voice my frustration, my mother intervened. "Firstly, your father is not someone who would succumb to something like this. He stayed calm during a motorcycle accident, when caught in an avalanche while skiing, and even when he was ill. He has overcome cancer and liver cirrhosis with sheer willpower. If you're concerned about inheritance, shouldn't you be more focused on your own spouse than your stepfather?" My mother chuckled while addressing my sister-in-law, and my brother was the one expressing his frustration. "Mom, I'm still alive. Don't talk about inheritance. It's inappropriate. It's rude." Their annoyance was likely because they couldn't inherit anything. However, it's the same for you. You're saying the same thing to your father now. Do you realize that? You're being disrespectful and uncivilized." My mother's words left them speechless, forcing them to remain silent. And there was no inheritance to claim. They stood there stunned. What should we do? We built a house and bought a car because we expected an inheritance. How will we sustain ourselves from next month? Last month, we went on a shopping spree using credit, and we still have outstanding loans for the air conditioner and refrigerator we purchased when we moved. My husband and I observed these 60-year-olds panicking due to a lack of funds. I quietly suggested, "Firstly, it's wrong to rely on money that you're not even sure of receiving. You lack proper planning skills." The two of them seemed too drained to argue with me. Then my brother proposed, "Let's sell a house. It's the only solution." While it sounded like a sensible idea, my sister-in-law vehemently opposed it. "No, that house is my sanctuary. I won't sell it. We've finally found a peaceful place to live, and I won't give it up because of this." "Oh, if your father doesn't have an inheritance, why not consider sharing your mother's inheritance?" "Yes, let's do that. It's a good idea," my sister-in-law suggested, approaching my mother. "I'm still alive." My mother's response was so comical that I nearly burst out laughing, but I had to hold it in. My brother looked at me. "Help me out here." I could almost hear his plea in his expression. At that moment, my husband, a banker, chimed in. "Why not consult a financial planner? If you have no income and no savings, you're in a hopeless situation. Selling the house seems appropriate. Fortunately, there's no mortgage, so selling it can bring in some cash for you to live on. Selling the house is the only way to escape this predicament." However, my sister-in-law remained adamant. "We won't sell the house. Absolutely not. If that's your stance, then contribute to our living expenses. After all, you're siblings, right?" This time, she redirected her attention to us, but my husband skillfully sidestepped the request. "It's not feasible. I only invest in ventures with assured returns." My husband's words, shaped by years in the loan department, carried weight. Even if there were potential returns, I wouldn't invest in such a couple. Amidst our discussion, the doctor called. Finally, the moment had arrived. I was mentally prepared for it. When my mother returned from the hospital room, she informed us, "It might not be good news for you. Your father has regained consciousness." She said this while casting a cold stare at my brother and his wife. My husband and I felt a wave of relief at my mother's words, and tears welled in our eyes. My brother and his wife, having realized they would not inherit anything, seemed indifferent to my father's condition. Yet perhaps they were attempting to maintain the facade of concerned children. "Dad, that's great. Yes, you're right." They uttered these insincere words. As my husband and I entered the hospital room after my mother, my brother and his wife trailed behind with seemingly innocent faces. Just before they could enter, my mother halted them. "You two are excused. Your obsession with money sickens me. If you have the time to visit, contemplate your life from tomorrow onwards." She dismissed them like stray dogs and concluded with this remark. "I'll leave you with this message. Thoughts become words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. And character becomes destiny." My brother and his wife were left stunned by my mother's unexpected speech. Huh? In essence, your thoughts ultimately shape your destiny. Unless you alter your thinking, your destiny remains unchanged. Reflect on this carefully. Consider how foolish, unsightly, and pitiable your actions are. With that, my mother firmly shut the door to the hospital room, signaling her determination to break ties with her son. Following that, my brother and his wife were compelled to sell their house. They had to part with their recently constructed home and land for less than a quarter of the $400,000 they initially paid, just 6 months after putting it on the market. This was due to the discovery that the ground in the area was quite unstable, causing land prices to plummet. Moreover, the surplus of houses for sale in the vicinity led to buyers offering very low prices. Despite their reluctance, they had no choice but to sell the house. The unemployed couple now has only a meager amount of cash to sustain them in their old age. it's likely that the funds will deplete before they begin receiving their pension in 5 years. My brother resorts to working as a day laborer for daily wages, while my sister-in-law takes on part-time work. It's a lamentable tale of individuals self-destructing by relying on their parents' inheritance. I hope they grasp the gravity of my mother's words. Surprisingly, there are many stories like this. When people become fixated on money, their judgment often falters. A previous customer of mine once remarked, "When my parents pass away, I'll use the inheritance to pay off my mortgage. So please arrange it for a 20-year term." Such cases are not uncommon. It appears that such situations are prevalent in the world. It's indeed a significant issue. Bankers, dealing with a diverse range of individuals, undoubtedly have a challenging job. There are countless untold stories due to confidentiality. Perhaps I should let my husband take over as the next storyteller. He might have even more fascinating tales to share. Just kidding. How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.